Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We're going to be right back with today's guest, but as always, we're going to give our sponsors a shout out. Now, don't hit that fast forward button. These are all companies that I used as an athletic director. They're all great companies. You should really be using them. So take the next 3 minutes, listen to our shout outs, then listen to our interview, and then go and visit these companies. I'm telling you, you're going to be glad you did. Here we go. We want to say thanks to Gipper for their support. Your students are on social media, so are a lot of their parents. And if they're not seeing content that celebrates their accomplishments and promotes your program, you're missing out on a great opportunity. Go to Gipper.com. Their team is going to have you creating world-class content for your school social media channel in seconds, and it's just so easy to use, even I can do it. The website is Gipper.com. Don't forget to mention the podcast. That's Gipper.com. We also want to thank Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We want to say thank you to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards or your school's Hall of Fame, go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame and take a look at their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to tell your school's unique history and brag about your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check them out today. We want to thank Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. Now, I didn't get my master's from Ohio University, but my assistant athletic director did, along with thousands of others. And it was just a great experience. It's totally online, about 20 months, very affordable. And as you're earning your master's, Ohio University also includes 11 NIAAA leadership training courses at no extra charge. To find out more, go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters in Athletic Administration. We want to say thank you to Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school. And our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided. Our student athletes loved the videos, of course, and our parents loved the streaming, but there's so much more. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We'd like to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and you can schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their score boards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule that live web demo today. We'd like to thank Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and then been disappointed in the results? Those days are gone. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with great success. Our coaches loved it, our parents loved it because it works. Go to snapraise.com. Check out their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. snapraise.com. We want to say thank you to Home Campus. Now, Home Campus is a platform that you're going to use every single day. Things like scheduling, results, rosters. How about student athlete eligibility and clearance? Who doesn't do that every day? Go to homecampus.com to get started. That's it, homecampus.com. And finally, we want to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic directors already get feedback, but a lot of times it's from a very small group that just wants to complain. Now, athletic surveys will connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% of your stakeholders that support your program. And having that data is incredibly valuable, especially when you're meeting with a frustrated parent, maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We're going to Georgia today, and our guest is Ashley Flavin. Now, if you haven't heard that name, shame on you. Ashley has an incredible background as an athlete, as a coach, as a leader in athletics, particularly in wrestling. She is currently the head coach for the women's wrestling program at Life University. I'm going to let her talk about the many, many accolades that she has. But Ashley Flavin, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you reaching out and wanting to chat with me.
Oh, well, absolutely. Full disclosure, Ashley's athletic director, Jamie Pendergast, regular listeners will recognize that name as Jamie's one of our regulars. She recommended that I reach out to Ashley and have her come on. Ashley, thank you again for accepting that invitation, and we're glad to have you. For our listeners, we're recording this August 29th. So, for just about everybody, it's back to school time in some fashion. Ashley, we always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that quick bio, where you were born, where you grew up, maybe take us up through your own college days, and then we'll take a break because there's a lot more after that. But what's the Ashley Flavin origin story?
The Ashley Flavin origin story. So I grew up in West Palm Beach, Florida, went to school at Lake Worth High School. So for those not familiar with Florida, that's maybe an hour and a half, probably a little longer in traffic from Miami, north of Miami. Um, Grew up there, wrestled the high school team there for 2 years. That was over 20 years ago, and I was the only girl on the guys' team. There were about 4,000 girls that wrestled in high school at that point. Now we're closer to 50,000, so a little bit of a different landscape these days if you look back 20 years ago. But I just, fell in love with the sport. My older brother wrestled. He's 7 years older than I am, and he introduced me. And when I got to high school, just wanted to try it out. Didn't didn't really know how to answer that age-old question, what do you want to be when you grow up? I really didn't have a clue. I was the first person in my family to go to college, didn't know much about getting to college or anything. I knew I wanted to wrestle. There were three colleges that had women's wrestling at the time. And again, quick fast forward, there's close to 150 now. So again, very different landscape now. But if we're back in the 2001 era, there's three colleges. One's in Minnesota, one's in Missouri, and one's in Kentucky. So I went to Missouri. Minnesota was too cold, and Kentucky never called, so ended up at Missouri Valley College. Wrestled there, and really, honestly, struggled. I had that hard freshman year where I wasn't ready for college. No one knew how to tell me how to get ready. I had support, but I didn't have guidance because no one else in my family had been through that process. I was in a little town called Marshall, Missouri. So my high school, I feel like, was bigger than the town. There were lots of amber waves of grain, but coming compared to the ocean waves I was used to, it was a very, very different situation. And I really had a hard time. So moved back home after my freshman year and moved out to I took about 6 months, kind of got myself together, got my head together down in Florida, and then went out to the Olympic Training Center. I had placed at the national tournaments, the age group national tournaments, and so was invited to go out and train. And then while I was there, Coach Terry Steiner, who was and still is the Olympic team coach for the women's national team, um, he invited me to stay, and I stayed at the OTC for the next 5 years and trained and learned a lot of hard lessons about how just because you're good in your little puddle doesn't mean that you're ready for the ocean. And spent some time getting beat up on by world champions because I had, only wrestled for 3 years, and these women had all done amazing things. And I mean, truthfully, that was part of my college struggle that first year was I had been, uh, sorry, I'm not sure if you can hear my baby in the background. So hopefully he's not going too crazy for you guys. But my my freshman year, I walked in and I was a top ranked recruit, like number one senior coming out of high school at my weight class, and had been on the men's team and had placed at nationals. And I was like, I'm going to be great. But everybody had done that, at least that, right? Plus they were 22 and senior world medalists. And I just didn't have a clue, and I was not ready for that level. We always joke. I mean, everybody's heard that, there's levels to this game, right? And I was not ready for those levels. But was at the OTC for 5 years, matured a lot, learned a lot, and then in 2007, I moved actually to Oklahoma City University. They were starting their first women's program, and I needed a change and went out there, wrestled for a year, was a college national finalist, got my grades in order, but I got hurt and I was 24. I didn't have a degree. I lost my scholarship because of my injury, and which is a whole different story, but not best practices for future parts of the conversation. Um, but I buckled down and finished school because I was 24 and no degree and was on my fourth surgery. And what do you do at that point? And so that luckily the art department picked up my scholarship, and so I graduated from OCU with honors, which was a far cry from my Missouri Valley days of my probably not going to be eligible GPA. And then I guess I took a couple years of getting in the workforce, realized my art degree wasn't going to get me maybe the job that I was hoping for, and went back to school, got a master's of public health and at University of Oklahoma, and now here we are. We've made it through the college days.
I was one when you first mentioned that there were three colleges at the time that had wrestling. If Missouri Valley College was going to be one of those, I actually spent some time coaching there back in the '90s. Our paths did not cross, but hey, we got a connection there. I'm curious. You mentioned that your brother wrestled and that you went out and you wrestled on the boys' high school team. Did you do any wrestling prior to that, like youth wrestling or anything like that? I know at the time girls or women's wrestling was just in its infancy, but any experience prior to your high school experience?
No, not unless you want to count fighting with my brothers at the house, which has its own level of experience. But youth wrestling at the time wasn't really big in Florida in general. And then girls were even less. So my experience was just that my older brother was in high school. I was since I was 7 years younger, so I was 7, 8 years old, saw him wrestle, thought it was neat, and then flash forward 7 more years till I got to high school and just like actually 9 years because it wasn't until my junior year and just went out and tried it and loved it and stuck with it. So
So looking back at that time, your high school competitive days, was there ever any thought in your head about, hey, I could do this, collegiately, professionally, I could be a coach. Was that ever part of your awareness back then?
so yes and no, though I'm laughing because you said my high school competitive days, and I'd argue I wasn't very competitive, but that's a different that's a different conversation. High school varsity boys wrestling as a 140-pound girl was a tough row to hoe. But there was talks that women's wrestling was going to be added to the Olympics, so that was something that I was interested in. I had no clue how anything worked, but I was in my head that was going to be my goal. As soon as I found out college wrestling existed for women, I wanted to do that. But as far as coaching, there weren't any female head coaches. That's just not something I saw in the wrestling world. So there was never a thought that coaching would be.
Well, we're going to get into your very, very successful, well, wrestling career as an athlete and coaching career later on. But can you think of a moment back then, high school, early days of college, where, by your own admission, you were kind of struggling with athletics and academics and things? Can you think of a moment that at the time it wasn't significant, but now looking back with experience and perspective, you can point to that moment and say, hey, that was a big moment for me. Anything stick out for you?
I,
I guess we had a little audio problem there. Ashley, I was wondering, looking back again at your high school career, your early college career, where by your own admission, you're kind of struggling. Um, Can you think of a moment that at the time it didn't seem significant, but now looking back, with wisdom and experience and let's say a pretty good degree of success, that you can look back at that moment and say, hey, that was a big deal for me. Anything come to mind?
Oh, goodness. Um, I would say in, and I think I knew this was big then, and this was just when Terry asked if I wanted to stay and train at the Olympic Training Center, even though I in my thoughts I hadn't done well at the tournament. I didn't win, I didn't place, but he must have seen something that made him think I should stay. That was something for me that I mean that was life changing to move to the Olympic Training Center. But I would say smaller than that, um, I think was probably when I started wrestling in at our local high school club team. Just the way that the guys embraced me and would cheer for me and could see that there was something else there. If I hadn't had their support, I don't know that I would have stuck with it. Just because there was just a lot of hard times, and having them was amazing.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. That the boys team was there. Using a wrestling term, in your corner. Okay, uh, let's go and take a break. But we're coming back with some more for our listeners. Our guest today is Ashley Flavin. She's the head coach for the women's wrestling team at Life University. Very successful coach. We're going to hear more about that later. But let's take that break. We're coming back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Gipper for their support of the podcast. Your student athletes are on social media, so are a lot of their parents. And if they're not seeing content that you've created to celebrate their accomplishments and promote your own program, you're really missing out on a great opportunity. Go to Gipper.com. Their team will have you creating world class content in seconds. And it's so easy, even I can do it. The website is Gipper.com. Check them out today. Make sure you mention the podcast, they'll give you a nice discount. That's Gipper.com. We also want to say thank you to Hometown Ticketing. Hometown Ticketing is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest today is Ashley Flavin, the head women's wrestling coach at Life University. Ashley, you shared with us kind of your journey from Florida to Marshall, Missouri, out to Oklahoma, the Olympic Training Center. Um, Up until this point, it seems like it was kind of that struggle, that grind. You're trying to get better. Share with our listeners some of those competitive experiences that you had, and maybe that big breakthrough, because again, your competitive career is very, very impressive.
It's funny. It's funny when you ask that. We talked about how, people don't want to brag about it, like they don't want to do that. And there's even a tendency for me to kind of clam up because the ultimate goal was to be an Olympian and that didn't happen. So it always sort of feels like a failure when you don't reach that final goal. So when I talk about my stuff, I kind of have to talk to myself like I would talk to my athletes. Um, and so some of the things were making the senior national team, winning university nationals twice, like I said, college national finalist, made a beach wrestling world team back in 2019. I was already coaching then, but that was kind of, I had lost a bet to the team, and we can talk about that a little later. And then, just some age group things. So like that junior, that U19, U20 age group placing at the nationals. So those were all really exciting experiences for me. Oh, and a Pan Am bronze medalist. I did that too. So
And by the way, bronze medalist, Pan Am. That first, now again, you were competing at a national level, but that first international competition, that very first one, what are your memories of that? Was that exciting? Was it intimidating? Take us through that.
So I'd say the first big one I mean, I went to a tournament while I was at Prairie Valley. We went to Canada. Wasn't a mindset. Even though that was international, I wasn't in a good, in a real place for that. But when I went down to El Salvador, it was so one, a little bit terrifying because the first thing they did was tell us don't travel at night and make sure you stay in highly populated areas. And I don't know if you've ever been to the San Salvador airport, but it's in the middle of nowhere. And we flew in the middle of the night. And then we had armed guards in our van, two like with automatic weapons. Every restaurant, McDonald's had a sniper on the roof, and it was just shocking for the delegation that went. We were not prepared. And then so like that piece alone was a lot to adjust to. And then once we got to wrestling, I mean, that was normal, right? That's just another day in the office. A mat is a mat no matter where you go. But I think the being introduced to another country just a little more reference to that.
Well, again, I wish we had more time to dive into your career. Listeners, just Google Ashley Flavin. Look at that career resume. It's going to be it'll knock you off your feet. You mentioned earlier the goal was to get in become an Olympian, win an Olympic medal. That didn't happen. You started doing some coaching at the clubs and some satellite things, but then you ended up working with a youth program in Georgia. Share a little bit of that with our listeners.
So when I was at the training center, it was really important for us, for Terry, who is my father figure, but for all of women's wrestling, he's the father figure. To give back to the younger kids. So he would send us to the state national team camps and clinics before the national tournament to help them get ready to have a strong female voice there to be a role model with them. And then I moved to Georgia, gosh, in 2015 and was really excited to be here. Was here for completely, had nothing to do with wrestling. Like this is just kind of where my life had taken me. And someone with the Georgia national team reached out and said, hey, we'd love to have you around with the Georgia girls wrestling just to help out you. You've done some things in the sport. So we'd love to have you as a role model. And I was excited to do that. And then she also mentioned that Life University was nearby and gave me the contact information for the head coach at the time and said, why don't you see if you're interested, maybe you could help out there. And so I reached out to him and ended up volunteer coaching, which was kind of just being a practice partner, but traveling around college seasons for 2 years. So it was a crash course in coaching for sure.
Wow. Now you also, it was during this time that you started volunteer coaching for the program at Life University. How did that happen? How did that unfold? And then how did you go from volunteer coach to head coach?
So when I reached out, I think the previous coach was also, I don't know that he was leery, but he was like, hey, let's see if this will be a good fit, right? You don't necessarily want to invite anybody onto your team. You want to make sure they fit and they gel with you. And it just so happened that it was, and we thought it was just going to be, once, twice a week, maybe just pop in every couple of weeks to help out. And it turned into, I was at every practice and I was on every trip and I was a part of all of the things because I don't know how to move in half measures. And then he stepped down to take a job. He actually does most of the computer coding for USA Wrestling for all of their systems. And so he stepped down, and that was 2 years into my volunteer coaching. And so the position opened up, and I decided, hey, may as well try. I was on a completely different path. I was working at a veterinary hospital. I was looking at applying to get a PhD and to do my doctor of veterinary medicine. I wanted to work at the CDC. This was long before COVID, but still, that's what I wanted to do. And then this job opened up, and I joke it's the dream job I never dreamt of because there had only been 5 female head coaches of a college wrestling program at that point. So yeah, just left on the opportunity and was lucky enough that Jamie trusted me.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a great story of, all those pieces you talked about fit, all those pieces coming together for a great fit. We're going to take another break, but when we come back, I'm going to have Ashley share how she has, helped build Life University into a national powerhouse. Again, I'm going to force her to brag about herself in her program. But let's go and take that break. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thank you to Vital Signs Wall of Fame for their support. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the events, or show off your school's athletic hall of fame, go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame and take a look at their interactive touch screen. That's right, touch screen video consoles. It's also a great way to share your school's unique history and brag a little on your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. Make sure you mention the podcast, you'll get a nice discount. Vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank the Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. Now, I didn't get my master's from Ohio University, but my assistant athletic director did, along with thousands of others, and it was a great experience. It's very affordable, just 20 months, 100% online. And while you're earning your master's, Ohio University also includes 11 NIAAA leadership training courses at no extra charge. To find out more or to get enrolled, go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters in Athletic Administration. We also want to thank our good friends at Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure that our school was a Huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided. Our student athletes love the videos, and our parents love the streaming, but there is so much more. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, and turn your school into a Huddle school. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Ashley, you've shared your journey from Lake Worth High School in Florida, across the country, a couple different colleges, U.S. Olympic Training Center, international competition. And now you've taken a volunteer position and you are suddenly the head women's coach for Life University. What was that like when you first took over? And I want you to, take our listeners through the journey of I'm saying this, turning it into the national power that it is today.
So when I got hired, basically after my interview, Jamie and I sat down and spoke, and she kind of waved her hands and said, "Fix all of this." The team, the team GPA, the high was like a 2.7. We had only ever had one All-American a year, and that's because there were only 9 athletes in the bracket, and she happened to get the right draw and took 8. Um, there were some social issues. There were not a lot of servant leaders. Not just it was in a rough spot. The team was really in a rough spot. And so the first thing that we had to do was find a way to turn the culture around of the team. That first summer, I actually went out to the National Wrestling Coaches Association Leadership Academy that they hold before convention. And it's a CEO academy that they do. And I learned a lot about the administrative piece of coaching, because no one really told me that coaching is mostly not sport related. So that was probably also a shock for Jamie to realize that I did not realize the amount of administrative duties that I was going to have. But so that first year was a learning curve for myself, for the team, just a lot of changes. And then I think we really just buckled down on trying to get the girls to buy into excellence and to give them higher expectations of themselves, and kind of in a lot of ways take expectations off of themselves and say, hey, let's see what happens when there's no limits, and see what you can do. And so we've gone from that to winning the national duels 2 years, to me from not knowing how to return an email on time to being coach of the year. So that was a pretty big jump. We won multiple conference titles. We've had numerous individual national titles. We're for the past, gosh, 4 years, we've been in the running for the individual national title. We keep taking second, which always a bridesmaid, never a bride is kind of how it feels. But Jamie reminds me that it's one thing to win it and then to fall off the map, but that sustained excellence is important. So I try to listen to my boss when she tells me that's what's important. And try to give that feedback to the girls too. It's something pretty special that you're always the threat to win a national title. So
Now, obviously, you've got to recruit kids that have some, athletic talent, but then, the coach is going to develop talent and add to that. In those early years of recruiting, what were some of the things that you were specifically looking for beyond, well, hey, this kid's a pretty good athlete?
right. And I would say even then, as much as we wanted great athletes, it's really hard to get an elite level athlete to a less than mediocre program. Like no one wants to go to a team that's losing. And so we had to sell the culture that we were building on of the team, which is the team said they wanted to feel like a family. So we made sure, like we tried to find ways to do that. In the beginning, it was team activities every month, like silly things like, painting pumpkins, or we have Thanksgiving with the team. We, have a gingerbread building house contest at Christmas time. So it started out like that. And then trying to pull in the elite level athletes as we went on. We recruited a couple really good kids. Peyton Fresson signed as a junior, really bought into our vision, and she wasn't ranked super high when we recruited her, and we weren't really good when we recruited her, and she ended up being a 3-time undefeated national champion. So we grew together in a lot of ways, but it was looking for good people in the beginning, and then not just who's a great wrestler, but who can we develop, like you were saying.
Hmm. I'm glad you mentioned Peyton. I'm going to ask you about Peyton in the next segment. You can probably guess where I'm going. Um, Looking back at your time, and again, spoiler alert, Ashley's, national, coach of the year. She's the first woman to coach, women's coach for wrestling to have a national championship team. The accolades are there. The program is there. Can you think back? I'm big on moments. Can you
Mhm.
think back to a moment? And again, your husband's your assistant coach, very accomplished, wrestler and coach in his own right. But can you think back to a moment at Life University where, and you never say, "Oh wow, we got it made now," but can you think back to a moment where you could see, "Hey, we've turned the corner. We're on the right track. We're going where we want to go," and maybe share that with our listeners.
Yeah, gosh, when we started getting phone calls from high level athletes, when we weren't chasing them down and we started getting those phone calls. I probably couldn't even tell you who the girl was that called, but I know when she picked up the phone first, that's when we kind of looked at each other and said, "Oh, hey, she called us. We're okay, maybe we've turned some things around. Things are
Yeah.
different now."
No, absolutely. And that was a message I would try to share with our coaches. And I had great coaches at the schools I was an AD at. I very great coaches, but they said, we don't want to be chasing these kids. Number one, you're not supposed to do it in high school. Okay. Number two, we want them to come to us. We want them to see our program and their parents and the kids say, "Hey, that's a school I want to go to." Very cool. We're going to do this at the end of the podcast, but if one of our listeners wanted to reach out, pick your brain a little bit more about, program development or just add you to their network, what's the best way that an athletic director or a coach can connect with Ashley Flavin?
Yep. So I am easy to find all over social media. My handle is Ash sword like the weapon SWORD Flavin FLAV as in Victor I as in Nancy. And that's where all my social media handles are. So easy to find me.
Okay. And also, go to the Life University website, athletics, athletic director Jamie Pendergast, and of course, head women's wrestling coach Ashley Flavin. Let's take another break, but when we come back, we've got some cool topics to talk about, as if we haven't already been talking about cool things. So please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We'd like to thank Sideline Interactive for their support. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and take a look at their indoor score tables and video boards. You can also schedule a live web demo and see all their products in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com. Schedule that live web demo today. We also want to thank our good friends at Snap Raise. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and then been disappointed in the results? Those days are gone. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with our teams with tremendous success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it because it works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms, but if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. Go to snapraise.com. You're going to be very glad you did. We also want to say thanks to our good friends at Home Campus. Now, Home Campus is a platform that you're going to use every single day for things like scheduling, rosters, scores, communication. How about student athlete eligibility and clearance? Who doesn't do that every single day? Go to homecampus.com. You're going to find out that they do all of these things better and faster than other platforms, and it's so easy to use. The contact is simply homecampus.com. That's it, homecampus.com. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Ashley, you've had tremendous success leading the program at Life University. What's next? I'm not saying what have you done for us lately, but where do you see the program going in the next couple of years?
So people listening won't have seen it, but I smiled real big when you said what's next, because that's actually our slogan for the team, is what's next. It's both the question and the answer. I got tired of kids saying, hey, how much longer is practice, or how many more do we have? I said, no, I want to hear you ask what's next, and then it's what's the next big thing. Then it's the answer, right? We're what's next. We're the next big thing. And so I guess that's the answer, right? We want to be the next big thing. I'd say some people might argue that we kind of are already there, but we're chasing that elusive national NAIA national title. As far as program things, I would love if we sat down in 4 more years to have an Olympian, to have another senior world team member. Right now, we have 2 athletes that are incoming freshmen that are on. One is on the U20 US world team, and one is on the U20 Canadian world team. Actually, I leave in 2 days for Spain for that competition, so that's pretty exciting. But I think what's next is stepping outside of the college realm and really trying to get that Life University name into the senior level of women's wrestling.
Oh, wow, that's exciting. It's going to be great to watch that. I'm going to throw a book title at you. It's over 20 years old, but it sounds like it might be something already on your library. And if it's not, I recommend it. Have you ever read Good to Great?
I have.
Jim
I
Collins?
have.
Yeah. Hey, there you go, right there. Good is the enemy of great.
That was a Jamie recommendation, actually. We have random book clubs every year, and she throws out book titles a lot, and that is definitely one that she recommended a few years ago. So
All right,
that
very
is
good.
on the shelf.
All right, I feel even better now that Jamie's recommended it. You and I were talking, and college athletics, NIL. Do you have any of your student athletes on wrestling or even at Life University? I know you're NAIA school, but any NIL experience so far?
Yeah, so When people think of NIL, they don't think, and I feel like we're throwing all the acronyms at one time. They don't think of the NAIA, right? They think of the NCAA and these big, these big things. But the NAIA actually approved NIL the year before the NCAA did, and we had the first athlete to get an NIL deal through some promotion using her picture to advertise some things. So that was exciting. And then I know we have a lot of athletes on our team that kind of get those smaller, I don't even know that I would consider them NIL, but I guess legally they are. It's kind of that ambassador kind of program where they get kickback if they put a code up on their Instagram, and then they're able to get a little bit of a kickback if they sell gear. But the biggest one that we've had was with Peyton Presson. Now she had all of those things. She had some things through Flow Wrestling, but the biggest one was through the WWE's Next in Line program, also conveniently NIL, and they go through all types of sports and look for who they think the next in line is, maybe who the next superstar would be. And so she had a contract with them her senior year and was doing promos with them while she was working with us and getting media training and all kinds of things. And it was a really great opportunity for her, and she's doing kind of some big things with it now. But yeah, that we do have those opportunities. But being an NAIA school and women's wrestling, like we're not Georgia football. We're not getting our door. The kids aren't getting their doors pounded down. I guess fortunately, maybe unfortunately, I don't know what's the right answer. But we've got some.
Well, and again, you mentioned it. The NAI, was a year ahead of the NCAA, and it doesn't have to be, that $100,000, $1 million NIL endorsement. It just, I remember as a college student, hey, an extra $100 in your pocket, that's an extra $100. So good for you. Let's go and talk about Peyton, because again, she was incredibly successful as a collegiate wrestler. That's so cool that she got that NIL deal through WWE. Um, again, good for her. She's going to be a professional athlete and something that she wants to do. I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but what are your thoughts on professional wrestling? And I'm going to shut up there before I get in trouble.
Yeah, so when I was little, I didn't know that there was a difference. I didn't figure that out till my older brother started wrestling in high school, and then I was just flabbergasted as a 7, 8 year old that this was different, right? I had no idea. He said he was going to be a wrestler, and I didn't see what I thought I was going to see. And then, I mean, honestly, I've made the joke that the WWE should pay attention to their ratings because they spike at our household whenever Peyton's on TV. Because we're all, we're tuning in to watch her. And I think the athletes there, I mean, again, they're athletes. It's incredible what they're able to do. It's so, gosh, there's just so much to it. There are so many different levels to it. And even though it's different, right? It's a different type of competition. I'm using air quotes. Different type of competition, different thought process. Like they're athletes, like without a doubt. And so to watch her and to see her hone other skills, the acting skills, the different pieces that go to. And sometimes I watch and I'm like, oh, okay, I can see the acting piece. And then I look again, I'm like, oh no, that's Peyton. Like that's her. And it's a lot of fun to watch her grow and develop.
Again, this is way off track, but a long time ago, one of my college football teammates became let's say, a small time TV producer, cable TV, and we would do the local pro wrestling circuit out of Portland, Oregon, and I would run a TV camera for him sometimes up on the ring, and it was a behind the scenes look for me into, professional wrestling. But again, incredibly athletic individuals, both men and women involved in that. So good for her. That is just very cool. Now, is she going to be, when we look for Peyton, is it Peyton Presson, or does she have a wrestling name?
Yeah, so her wrestling name is Kendall Gray. And I, for the life of me, can't remember which way that she spells it at this point. I know there's only one L. I forget if it's Gray with an A or an E. But if you look for Peyton Presson, Kendall Gray will pop up, so you're able to find her. And she, again, it's a lot of fun to watch her. I'm excited to see what she's able to do.
Oh no, that's great. It's going to give me another reason to watch wrestling. Um, Ashley, this has just been so cool spending some time with you, finding out that we got a little bit of connection there, Florida and Missouri Valley. But we're not done
Who would
yet.
have thought? Who would have thought, right? Florida to Missouri Valley, like of all
Well,
the two connections to have, those two specifically.
yeah, and my wife and I, we came from Oregon to Missouri Valley as teachers and coaches. So go figure that. But we're not done yet. We always wrap up with the athletic director's toolbox. Now, you're not an athletic director, but you certainly know your way around the world of athletics. You've got a great AD there at Life University. We're going to take our final break here from Athletic Surveys, who sponsor this segment. And then when we come back, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director, or we could say a brand new coach, on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 items in their toolbox. So let's take that last break. And when we come back, we're going to see what Ashley Flavin puts in her new athletic director toolbox. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We'd like to thank Athletic Surveys for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment of the podcast. Athletic directors already get feedback, but a lot of times it's from a very small group that only wants to complain. Well, athletic surveys will connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% of your stakeholders that support your program. And having all of that information is incredibly valuable, especially when you're meeting with that frustrated parent, or maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We have been visiting with Ashley Flavin, just an outstanding record in athletics as a competitor, as a coach. She's the head coach for women's wrestling at Life University. She's not an athletic director, but I think she knows a thing or two about athletics. Ashley, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director or a coach, brand new leader on the very first job, but I'm only going to let you put 3 items in the toolbox. So, what 3 items are going to go into Ashley Flavin's toolbox?
Okay, well, I'm gonna ask for four because I need a pen. So I need four. Will you give me a pen?
I'll give you a pen.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the first one is going to be a journal of some sort. I am old school pen and paper kind of girl. I guess you don't need the pen if you're going to take notes on your phone, but I feel like that's not as effective. But an actual journal where you can not just sit down and brainstorm where you want things to go, but where you can really take notes on conversations that you have. I think if you're a new AD, getting to know your coaches and getting to know their sports, especially if it's sports you're unfamiliar with. If you're a football coach, you might not know the nuances of baseball, or if you've always been a basketball person, you probably don't know anything about wrestling. And so understanding the nuances of each sport, and then even within the sports, there's a difference between the men's and the women's and what they're expecting. I think that's important. If you're a coach, you're going to want to know feedback from your athletes, things that are important. Key phrases that you hear or see that you want to write down, even if it's just for t-shirt sale, throw on the back of a t-shirt, or is it something that, like we talked about with the what's next, like what are you building around that? Is it something that resonates with you? So a journal for sure, and my pen, obviously. So that is number one, would be my journal. Number two would be some sort of scheduling. For me, it's a book. I have a, just a hard back like schedule that I always have with me. My planner, when I lose it, I am lost. I know that's, oh, that's such a, big thing to say, but my whole life is in my planner. And so being able to map things out even a year in advance and being able to schedule that far in advance is helpful. When you're juggling, if you're an AD, juggling 20 teams, if you're a coach, you're juggling 45 athletes, not to mention the family that or personal life that you have, allegedly that you're supposed to be having some sort of work-life balance. Having a way to keep that all on track is really helpful. So a planner of some sort is a really big one. And then my last one, I keep this on the computer, but it's just a hard, like a copy that you can always go to. You need to be able to see your budget at all times. You need to be able to look at where you're at, be able to put things in, make adjustments, see if something went over, something went under. Every school is going to have a different way of keeping their budget. I think that we're very lucky in having Jamie. Jamie says, exceptional judgment means minimal controls. I don't know if she's used that on the podcast with you yet, but that is her leadership style. So she just gives us our budget and she says, all right, give me an idea of where you're going to split your money up into. But it's not, hey, I said I need $3,000 for uniforms. I can only use $3,000 for uniforms. If I spent less on food, I could put it into uniforms if I wanted to. But that also means I have to make sure that I have exceptional judgment and I'm not losing track of that. Other schools, if you say you need $3,000 for uniforms and you go to 3,001, you're going to be in a tough spot. And so just being able to always access your budget and check in and see where you're at is really important. So those would be my 3.5 things, counting my pen.
Well, I think the journal implies a pen, and I love them all. And the scheduler, I'm very much the same way. And I still use it, but as an AD, I had my big daily planner, and my coaches they understood that they might have a game or a match on their website, but if that game wasn't in my planner, that game didn't exist. So no,
Mhm.
I'm right there with you. Very cool stuff. Great tools. Thanks again for sharing. One more time, if one of our listeners wanted to reach out, pick your brain a little bit more, or just add you to their network, what's the best way they can get a hold of Ashley Flavin?
So you can find me on all social medias as Ash Sword Flavin. If you want to hear more about the team, we are LifeU WWR. Also on all platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, if TikTok, if you are so inclined. I don't have one, but the team convinced me needed one, so the team has one. So yeah, just look us up. We'd love to add you.
Okay. Oh, and we're gonna have to get you back on down the road. I want to hear that story about where you lost a bet with the team and you had to go back and wrestle. That sounds like a great story. Okay.
Yep. And it got me a all expenses paid trip to Qatar. So it was quite the journey.
Even better. Okay. Ashley, thanks again for sharing. All the best with the program moving forward. What's next? I love it. And definitely, we're going to get you back on the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you and we appreciate our listeners. And just a reminder that we upload the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every day, sharing stories and best practices. So we hope you come back and join us on the next Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time.